Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. We will have details on how the Alberta government says it is taking steps to help bring down our high electricity bills. March is Fraud Prevention Month. Lethbridge police have a warning about the types of scams you need to watch out for. And there's talk that the U.S. government is looking at ways to potentially bring down the Israeli government in light of the war in Gaza. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The former mayor of Calgary is the latest to enter the Alberta NDP leadership race. Naheed Nenshi made the announcement from Calgary, where his slogan is Naheed Nenshi for Alberta, for all of us. Nenshi calls himself an underdog and refers to the governing UCP as immoral and dangerous. Nenshi says, quote, "We can't afford any more of Premier Daniel Smith and her government." He says torpedoing health services for vulnerable trans youth, undermining vaccination efforts, and overseeing a faltering healthcare system are of immense concern to him.
Too many of us don't have a family doctor. We don't know if the ER or the ambulance will be there when we need it. Our kids' classes are getting bigger and bigger. Our summers are filled with forest fire smoke, and all of us feel the impacts of floods and of droughts. What we need now is smart, credible government. We need a government that respects us. We need a government that we can trust. And sadly, we don't have it. Danielle Smith and her government are not only incompetent, they're immoral and they're dangerous. The only things they know how to do are pick fights and waste money.
The 52-year-old Nenshi served as Calgary's mayor from 2010 until 2021 and saw his popular vote plummet from 74% all the way down to 51% during his last run for the city's top job back in 2017. Nenshi joins a field of 5 candidates to take over from Rachel Notley in June. They are Kathleen Hanley, Sarah Hoffman, Jody Callahan-Stonehouse, Rocky Pancholi, and longtime Labour leader Gil McGowan. The UCP say they're taking steps to help make utility bills more affordable for Albertans. Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf says 2 temporary policy changes are being implemented to help bring down those electricity bills. He says the first will limit the offer price of natural gas generating units owned by large generators if net revenues cross a certain threshold. The second will require natural gas generating assets to be made available as directed by the Alberta Electric System Operator in certain circumstances such as extreme weather and other times of peak demand. Neudorf says these 2 changes will allow generators to earn revenue while ensuring Albertans will have access to more affordable and reliable power. Social Services Minister Jason Nixon says if Budget 2024 passes, the province will invest $840 million over the next few years to provide more than 5,000 affordable housing units. Nixon says the initiative will also help to create over 6,000 jobs over that period of time. He says the plan will help both seniors and First Nations communities.
The 2024 capital plan also includes $75 million over 3 years for the Indigenous Housing Capital Program. This program supports investments in Indigenous-led housing projects. These projects encourage the public and private developers to partner with Indigenous communities and governments and organizations to build capacity and create economic opportunities. With our growing population of seniors, Alberta's government is also making sure that seniors' housing remains available and supports communities where Albertans are happy to retire. Budget 2024 invests almost $130 million in seniors' housing to upgrade and modernize lodges across the province. This funding will make sure that housing continues to meet the needs of seniors today and those communities remain sustainable for years to come.
NDP housing critic Janice Irwin says her party will be debating the UCP on Bill 205, the Housing Security Act, to help protect Alberta families from huge rental increases across the province. Now, speaking of which, rent in Alberta has increased 20%. That's according to a new study by Rentals.ca and Urban Nation's newest national rental report. As for the rest of the country, it's increased 10.5%. In our province, Calgary finished 26th out of 35 cities with rent at $1,711 for 1 bedroom. That's a 9.7% increase year over year. Edmonton finished 32nd out of 35 cities with the average rent for a 1 bedroom at $1,312 a month. As for Lethbridge, the average price for a 1 bedroom came at $1,215 and a 2 bedroom at $1,408. And in Medicine Hat, rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,118 and $1,278 for a two-bedroom. Average rent for all property types across the country came in at $2,193. The highest rent for purpose-built and condo apartments were in Vancouver at over $3,000, $3,017 a month, and Toronto at $2,803. Education Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides says the Alberta government will be investing $2.1 billion over the next few years to build and modernize schools for students. He says if passed, Budget 2024 would advance 43 priority school projects, including 10 new schools, 10 replacement schools, and 5 modernizations. Part of the plan is to build 17 new schools in the Calgary region. Alberta's largest city is expected to have a population of more than 1.5 million people by the end of this year. Provincial government officials offered an update as to the cleanup of oil and gas wells and their impact on Indigenous communities. Through this site rehabilitation program, the province dished out around $1 billion to more than 500 companies to help with reclamation. Around $137 million remains unused by grant recipients, and the federal government wants the unused funds returned to Ottawa. Energy Minister Brian Jean says if the Trudeau government is serious about reconciliation, it will release the funding so that this important work could continue.
Now, we've specifically asked the federal government to keep these funds in Alberta for the benefit of Indigenous communities and continue this great success. We believe there are many additional reclamation opportunities for these funds where they could be used. And all of these chiefs agree with me because they all have these challenges on their reserve lands and they need to be cleaned up. And they are the federal government's responsibility. Keeping these unspent federal funds in Alberta would maintain the momentum that has been achieved by the success of the SRP and our reclamation program. Using these funds as they were intended to be used for supporting the cleanup of Alberta oil and gas assets. If the federal government is serious, if our Prime Minister is serious about reclamation and the environment and Indigenous Canadians and Indigenous Albertans, one way they can support it is by authorizing Alberta right now to use the funds we have in our bank account, these leftover federal funds, so that we can continue with the important work of helping clean up oil and gas sites on Indigenous lands, as is their responsibility.
A week to celebrate Indigenous culture kicked off Monday morning at the University of Lethbridge, and it included a very colorful powwow. BCN's Naveen Day has that story.
Indigenous Awareness Week kicked off at the University of Lethbridge's Science Commons on Monday morning. After prayers, a song, and speeches from dignitaries, they held a mini powwow and dance demonstration. Vice Provost for Indigenous Relations at the university, Dr. Leroy Littlebear, says this is the first year the week is being celebrated campus-wide.
This Indigenous Awareness Week 2024 also plays the role of setting contexts, setting a foundation, and, celebrating that coming together. That's the important part of Indigenous Awareness Week.
Since becoming president and vice chancellor at the university, this is Dr. Digvir Jayas's first Indigenous Awareness Week. He says the purpose of the week is to incorporate Indigenous methods and wisdom into their modern teachings.
So the Indigenous Awareness Week really is to expose all students, Indigenous as well as non-Indigenous students, to Indigenous way of doing things and how to then incorporate those Indigenous perspectives in our research work, in our teaching, in our community engagement. So that has been the purpose. And although it's a week-long event, but I think our commitment to working with the Indigenous people continues throughout the year.
In addition to the kickoff of Indigenous Awareness Week, the Faculty of Fine Arts was given a traditional Blackfoot name, which when translated into English means fancy writer.
I'm new to the University of Lethbridge. I started my role in July, and so I think for me, the gifting of a Blackfoot name recognizes a lot of the work that faculty members and that previous leadership in the faculty did to contribute to reconciliation. And I think for me, what the gifting of a Blackfoot name means is a responsibility, a very joyful responsibility for the faculty to continue to contribute to reconciliation, to decolonial practices, and really to supporting best possible educational outcomes for Blackfoot students and for Indigenous students in fine arts.
Indigenous Awareness Week runs at the University of Lethbridge until March 15th. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Love all of that wonderful color. Wow. You know, the first official day of spring is not until March the 19th, but it is feeling very much like spring right now. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek of the forecast. Jeanette, it should feel like spring for what, most of the week here in southwestern Alberta?
Yeah, it certainly should, Hal. In fact, that mercury is just going to keep shooting up until we actually get right through next weekend. We're going to be seeing temperatures in the mid-teens as we get to the end of the week. In fact, the coldest day all week is only going to be 9 degrees. I should say, like, that's already above average for this time of year. But we have a couple of 10s there for today and tomorrow, along with a wind from the west from 30 to 50 kilometers per hour. And it's going to be a beautiful week. I'll be back later in the show to give you a lovely forecast as well as a peek at the national weather forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. You know, March is not only time for spring and the flowers coming up, but it is also Fraud Prevention Month. According to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, last year Canadians lost $567 million to scammers. That's an increase of $37 million from 2022. LPS Sergeant Kevin Talbot, who's with the Economic Crimes Unit of Lethbridge Police, says the percentages of those reporting that they've been a victim of fraud actually remains quite low.
Well, only about 5 to 10% of frauds are actually reported. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is embarrassment. No one likes to be taken advantage of when there's obvious red flags. So often people are too embarrassed to actually report it. Often people will think that there's nothing that can be done when it comes to a fraud that they're a victim of. And just simply, it happens so frequently that a lot of individuals think that this is just the way it is and they have to expect to be a victim at some point in time.
Officials say the 3 most reported types of fraud include identity theft, service fraud, and phishing. Phishing meaning that fraudsters get victims to give away sensitive information, including their social insurance numbers, passwords, or banking details, especially online platforms such as Facebook. An Alberta avalanche has claimed another life. RCMP in Canmore say a 19-year-old from Kelowna, British Columbia, and a friend were buried following an avalanche on Tower Peak in Kananaskis Country on Sunday night. They say the 2 men were skiing in the backcountry when the avalanche struck around 8 p.m. The one man was able to dig himself out, but the 19-year-old could not. His body was recovered Monday morning around 9:45 a.m. with the help of Canmore RCMP and Kananaskis Mountain Rescue. Officials say it's always important to check the Avalanche Canada website for weather and terrain conditions before heading out to the backcountry. The Alberta government says there are still 53 active wildfires burning here in the province. Alberta Wildfire says 91% are under control and the other 9% are being held. The bulk of the wildfires are still burning in the northern part of the province, including 10 in the high-level forest area, 9 in both Fort McMurray and Slave Lake regions, along with 7 in both Grand Prairie and the Edson Forest districts. Parks and Forestry Minister Todd Loewen declared an early start to the wildfire season 10 days earlier than usual. It traditionally runs from the beginning of March until the end of October. Grieving members of an Ottawa suburb and members of the local Sri Lankan community held a vigil over the weekend to remember the 6 victims of a mass stabbing. Those who mourned laid dozens of flowers and toys in their honor. A mother, her 4 young children, and a family friend were all murdered by an international student who was staying with the family at the time. The children's father was also attacked, but survived and remains in hospital in stable condition. The suspect, 19-year-old Fabio de Zoisa, faces 6 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. His case was adjourned until March 13th to give him more time to hire a lawyer. The UN Security Council is urging gangs in Haiti to stop the violence in the country, which includes sexual violence and the recruitment of children. The Council says it expects to send a multinational force soon to help end the violence in the Caribbean island nation. UN Ambassador Bob Ray and U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken were scheduled to meet with leaders in Jamaica as part of an urgent push to solve Haiti's spiraling crisis. Haiti's prime minister is facing increasing pressure to either resign or agree to a transitional council as he remains locked out of his own country. The United Nations chief is urging Israel and Hamas to honor the spirit of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan by silencing their guns. Antonio Guterres says also says Hamas needs to show compassion by releasing the remaining hostages seized by the militants during its October 7th attack on southern Israel.
Even though Ramadan has begun, the killing, bombing, and bloodshed continue in Gaza. We recently entered the 6 months since the Hamas terror attacks in Israel and the catastrophic Israel onslaught in Gaza began. My strongest appeal today is to honor the spirit of Ramadan by silencing the guns and removing all obstacles to ensure the delivery of life-saving aid at the speed and massive scale required. At the same time, and in the Ramadan spirit of compassion, I call for the immediate release of all hostages.
Apparently, there's talk by the U.S. government to look at ways of collapsing the Israeli government and having Benjamin Netanyahu removed as prime minister. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the Biden administration is apparently getting frustrated with Israel and its plan to wipe out Hamas at all costs, including risking the lives of more Palestinians in Gaza. That's angering Muslims in a number of states in the United States.
Our election year here in the United States is affecting things. The progressives are pushing Joe Biden to move on his Israel policy. We have people inside his cabinet. We have people inside Congress who are calling for a ceasefire. They should talk to Hamas about a ceasefire, but they are calling on President Biden to push Bibi Netanyahu for a ceasefire. And that is why we're seeing a lot of this pivoting, because he's afraid of losing states like Michigan, where there is a very large pro-Palestinian population there.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will also discuss a potential new port being built by the United States near Gaza to bring in more humanitarian aid. She'll have details coming up later in our broadcast. Brad Gushue of St. John's, Newfoundland skipped his team to a Canadian Men's Curling Championship for a record 6th time in his career. The Gushue foursome defeated Saskatchewan's Mike McEwen 9-5 on Sunday in the Brier Final in Regina.
If you asked me after the 6th end, I didn't know if I'd be here, but it feels awesome. You know what? To start off the week the way we did, and really we lacked confidence at the beginning of the week, and it was fun to see it develop more and more as the week went on. And the ice surface was a little different out there tonight, and I think it took a little of that confidence away, but you know, we battled through and got the win, which is awesome. This moment is awesome. This is this is what it's all about. This is why I play. This is why I love the game, and I love this moment, you know, to see it all come to fruition after the hard work this week.
The Gushue foursome collected $108,000 in prize money and will go on to represent Canada at the Men's World Championships March 30th through April 7th in Switzerland. Hopefully the Gushue foursome can bring home the title for Team Canada next month. Well, it was a beautiful start to the work week here in southwestern Alberta, nice and mild, and that trend should continue for most of the week. Full weather details are on deck. You know, spring is not supposed to arrive for about another week or so, but it has certainly felt like spring across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, I saw my neighbors cleaning out their barbecues over the weekend. It appears as though barbecue season has arrived here in Lethbridge.
Oh, that is so exciting to hear, Hal. I think that we're all pretty tired of winter, and we're saying, bring on the spring. And as we're looking at these temperatures, it's definitely bringing on the spring-like conditions, that's for sure. We've got lots of double digits here, up to the teens as we get to the end of the week there. So 10 for a high on Tuesday, 9. There's our coldest day of the week, not too bad at all. Mainly clear skies as well. We're up to 13 degrees for both Thursday and Friday. And then on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we're seeing that high of 14 degrees. So all the way up to those mid-teens, which is well above average for this time of year. So the average high 5 degrees, average low -7, 21. That was our high temperature that happened back in 2005, and the coldest was -36. That is very cold for this time of year. That happened back in 1951. Okay, sun rose this morning at 7:52. We're seeing that change there because of the springing ahead. So now we're in the 7 o'clock hour again. And then there you go, sunset at 7:32. So we're getting so close to that 12-hour mark. We're seeing 11 hours, 40 minutes of daylight. Okay, on the west coast tomorrow, we're seeing a pair of 9s, Victoria and Vancouver. Victoria is seeing a 60% chance of showers tomorrow, up to 40K winds, 50K winds as you get into the Juan de Fuca Strait there. And Vancouver seeing a 60% chance of showers in the morning, going to clear up, going to see actually see the sun shine in the afternoon, partly cloudy skies there. 6 for a high in Edmonton tomorrow, 9 for a high in Calgary, partly cloudy skies across Alberta tomorrow. As we get into the rest of the prairies, we're seeing mainly cloudy skies in Saskatoon, -1 for a high. Regina seeing a 30% chance of showers, 3, and increasing clouds in Winnipeg with a high of 2 degrees. As we get into the central part of the country, we're actually seeing a lot more clear skies out here. Lots of sunshine, 14 for a high in Toronto, 11 in Ottawa, and high of 9 in Montreal. As we get into the Maritimes, this is where we're seeing kind of a mixed bag of precipitation. So we're seeing flurries mixed with showers, both in Fredericton and Halifax tomorrow. 3 degrees in both of those cities, high of 2 tomorrow. In Charlottetown, seeing another 2 to 4 centimeters of snow tomorrow morning, and then high of 2 degrees in St. John's. We're having a rainfall warning in effect tonight into Tuesday morning. Still expecting 5 to 10 millimeters of rain to fall tomorrow morning. Also a wind warning in effect there. So that should be ending Tuesday, but what we're seeing is up to 80K winds and even up to 100 kilometers per hour along certain parts of the coast there. So that's what's happening. There's your weather.
A Calgary-based aerospace company has been awarded a $211 million federal contract to help maintain and sustain Canada's aging fleet of CF-18 fighter jets. The deal with Arcfield Canada will last for the next 5 years. The old planes are expected to be phased out of service by the year 2032. In a news release, the Department of National Defense says Arcfield will continue to support the CF-18 fleet's avionics weapon systems and supply parts as needed. Officials said the CF-18 dates all the way back to 1982, so the technology needed some serious updating. There are reports that the Canadian household debt-to-income ratio is around 184.5%. That means for every dollar earned, $1.84 is owed. Now, that's quite the sobering thought. So how do you dig yourself out of that hole, out of all of that debt? Ken Prestige, manager of Prestige Consulting, shares the first step to financial freedom.
The first thing you've got to do is you've got to find out what you're spending. In all honesty, a lot of people don't know what they're spending. I'm going to put it this way. They see the trees, the individual bills, but they don't see the forest, the total debt load that they're carrying compared to the income that they're carrying. So the first step is to find out what you're actually indebted to, what your totals come to, rather than just looking at individual bills.
Hear more helpful advice from finance expert Ken Prestige as he chats with BCN producer Michael Clausen coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 31 points on the day to finish at 21,769. The Dow was up 46 points to 38,770. The S&P 500 was down 5 on the day to 5117. And the Nasdaq was down 65 points to 16,019. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 8 cents to 77.93 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 5 cents to $1.76 US. Gold was up 3.80 on the day to 21.8274 US an ounce, and silver was up 16 cents to 24.47 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.16 per bushel, barley's at $6.12. Canola's at $13.93, and corn is at $7.37 per bushel. Live cattle were unchanged for the April contract at $187.60. Feeder cattle were down 95 cents to $248.25, and lean hogs' April contract was down $1.10 to $83.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.16 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the former mayor of Calgary is the latest to enter the Alberta NDP leadership race. Naheed Nenshi made the announcement from Calgary, where his slogan is Naheed Nenshi for Alberta, for all of us. Nenshi calls himself an underdog and refers to the governing UCP as dangerous. Nenshi joins a field of 5 candidates to take over from Rachel Notley in June. They are Kathleen Hanley, Sarah Hoffman, Jody Calahoo-Stonehouse, Raki Pancholi, and longtime Labour leader Gil McGowan. You know, there's talk that the U.S. government is looking at potentially collapsing the Israeli government and taking power away from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain why momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of local stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Men across southern Alberta are invited to a special evening Friday, March 15th at 7 p.m. at Free Grace Fellowship. Join John Gartley, Executive Director with the Southern Alberta Bible Camp, with a powerful message on equipping. Praise and worship will be led by Joe Clausen and the Interdenominational Band. Plus, free wings and refreshments will be served after the message. emceeing for the night will be our very own BCN's Hal Roberts. It's free to attend with a free will offering being collected. For more information, visit Southern Alberta Men's Ministry Facebook page. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information and to book an appointment, call 403-380-6338 or visit their website, lethbridgelegalguidance.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Reports are beginning to surface that the U.S. is looking at ways of collapsing the Benjamin Netanyahu government in light of the ongoing conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. U.S. officials are apparently getting quite frustrated with the Israeli Prime Minister. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, obviously the frustration stems from the amount of innocent lives which have been lost in this ongoing conflict since the October 7th Hamas attack on southern Israel. But what kind of methods will the Biden administration consider in order to have Benjamin Netanyahu removed as prime minister?
Yeah, this is a tough one to tackle because, look, war is never pretty, right? So we know about the consequences of war. We know that Israel has claimed and doubled down on trying to prevent civilian casualties as much as possible. But we also know the Gaza Health Ministry keeps raising that number. And the tragedies of war are always real and always devastating. What we're seeing here unfold on the international stage is the public kind of rift that's growing between Bibi's government and Joe Biden's government. Now, we've known about this, obviously, if you recall, the rift between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Obama was also a thing. It was always in the news and always talked about, and it affected somewhat the policy. But traditionally, the U.S. and Israel will always be allied. And these personal relationships usually don't take a huge toll on the stance that the United States takes. Now, we want to add to that a few layers that are more unique to this situation. To believe that anyone besides Netanyahu who would be in office right now in Israel, meaning a left-leaning politician, a centrist politician, or right-wing politician like Bibi Netanyahu, would handle the aftermath of the October 7th attack on Israel differently, we are dead wrong. This is an existential threat. That is the way most Israelis are seeing things right now. I want to also remind everyone that most of those who were killed or taken hostage on October 7th were living in the South, were actual what we call peaceniks, were Israelis who are left-wing, believe in peace, believe in coexistence, want to make peace with the Palestinians, and they're the ones who were caught in this war. So that has really moved the population to be obviously support this war. They know that it's an existential threat. They know that it will affect them and their children. So it's not really a bipartisan issue inside Israel. On the other hand, I also want to talk about our election year here in the United States is affecting things. The progressives are pushing Joe Biden to move on his Israel policy. We have people inside his cabinet. We have people inside Congress who are calling for a ceasefire. They should talk to Hamas about a ceasefire, but they are calling on President Biden to push Bibi Netanyahu for a ceasefire. And that is why we're seeing a lot of this pivoting, because he's afraid of losing states like Michigan, where there is a very large pro-Palestinian population there. So this is why we have to put together all the different pieces, a lot of nuance here and a lot of moving parts. So in this coming year, I know we're moving towards the election, and of course, the rhetoric will change on Israel.
Now, there are reports surfacing, Lisa, that the U.S. military is headed to Gaza to build a port For what purpose? Is it to maybe bring in aid via sea?
Yeah, so this has been the challenge has been getting aid to the Palestinians. As you saw, the attack, they basically they're so hungry. This is really a very, very tragic situation because the Palestinians are not getting aid. Hamas is not providing them with the proper channels to which they can get food and proper basic needs. And so when this truck comes, of course, people are attacking the drivers. I mean, I saw an interview with an Egyptian driver, and they attacked his truck, they broke all the glass. And so then they thought they should drop the aid in. And again, there were casualties in that instance as well. So there was the idea of creating this port, very, very half-baked idea, because it will be very difficult to vet what comes in and out of that port. Will it be weapons? Will it be aid? Who will get that aid? How will it be allocated? Will it go to the proper hands, or will Hamas confiscate that aid? And that is why a lot of people think, again, this is more of a political stance that the Biden administration is taking, like, look at us, we're doing so much for the Palestinian people. Again, we'll have to see what the actual strategy is, how they will bring this about, and really more details about this port.
And apparently 2 weeks after the attack on southern Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu himself discussed the idea of delivering humanitarian aid to Gaza with Biden via the sea. Now, Lisa, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan has begun. Is there a new ceasefire in place in Gaza? I mean, there were reports that Qatar had threatened to expel Hamas from their base in Doha if a ceasefire wasn't reached by this time.
Yeah, it's been horrible. I think again, a lot of people. We saw the Oscars over the weekend. People calling for a ceasefire, but not acknowledging the fact that this terror organization, Hamas, is the one who keeps rejecting every single ceasefire offer. Of course, Israelis want to get their hostages back. Of course, we'd love to see an end to this war, but it will take two sides to agree to a ceasefire. Now, with Ramadan coming, you think it's a holy month. You'd think, obviously, we want to see peace. We want to see this war come to an end. The leaders of Hamas, the leaders of Hezbollah have doubled down and asked that for it to be a bloody Ramadan. They have called for it to be a bloody Ramadan, calling on all jihadis to continue to kill, to continue to wage war, and to kill the infidel. There are videos on this. I know there's a lot going on social media regarding this war, but I urge everyone to really watch the core issues here, and that is watching Hezbollah, watching Hamas, watching Iran's regime pull the puppet strings. If you're asking for a ceasefire, who needs to agree to a ceasefire? Who needs to surrender here? The sooner we get to the root of this, the sooner we can put an end to it, and that would require Hamas to release the hostages, put down their weapons, and to agree to a legitimate and long-lasting ceasefire, which we had right before this war started in October.
You know, not only is Israel at war with Hamas, but as you mentioned with Hezbollah as well, Israel Defense Forces Home Front Command is now apparently setting up large bomb shelters in northern Israel in anticipation of an all-out conflict with the terrorist group Hezbollah.
Right. So with Hezbollah in Lebanon, they have been lobbing missiles into Israel since October 7th, by the way. And this is an ongoing thing. Israel deals with this all the time. Now, the reason we haven't seen a full-on war with them is because Israel has tried not to escalate that into a war. But with the attacks increasing, it's, again, Iran's regime, the puppeteer that is, turning that burner on and off and increasing the pressure on Israel, and really introducing this as a new front and a new escalation. Again, with everything going on in Rafah, with everything going on in Gaza, and that continuing, it would behoove Iran's regime to now try to get Israel's attention on fighting a war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Similarly, we have a lot of Hezbollah assets in Lebanon in civilian areas. The good news inside Lebanon is that we have a lot of anti-Hezbollah constituents, Lebanese people who want to eradicate this cancerous Hezbollah from their country. So that is why Israel is so careful, and the United States as well, to contain the Hezbollah threat and not to get civilians hurt, not to get civilians killed, really introducing a lot of these things before the war starts or before that escalation goes into Lebanon.
U.S. Central Command says that Houthi rebels attacked a Singapore-flagged bulk carrier around 50 nautical miles southeast of Aden earlier today. Now, fortunately, the anti-ship ballistic missiles fired from Yemen missed their target and the ship continued along on its voyage. But Lisa, a Houthi spokesperson also said that they successfully hit several U.S. destroyers despite an official statement from CENTCOM saying that no U.S. nor coalition ships were damaged in the attack. He said versus he said, I guess.
Exactly right. And I think this is obviously a narrative that the Biden White House wants to kind of shy away from, because this is yet another war, right? All connected again, all being puppeteered by Iran's regime, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. And in each case, we're playing whack-a-mole here. And I say we, it's the international community that is fighting these assets. And that is, of course, any carrier ship that wants to go through this area is at risk. They're saying they didn't hit this carrier from Singapore, but the next time they will. And they have, right? So many different carriers, European, American, otherwise, there have been casualties now that we can report. So what is the end game? I mean, again, we are in an election year here. So the Biden administration really, again, shying away from calling this a large escalation, calling this a war, involving themselves, and really trying to deliver a stern message. And again, responding to these one-offs. But what message will we send the Iran regime after 3 years of saying, you know what, we're going to play along with you because we want to get another nuclear deal? So after being very kind, trying to use diplomacy, trying to wine and dine Iran's regime, it looks like they're not going to get this message of deterrence now at this point.
Last month was the 2-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. Lisa, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says they're simply running out of ammunition right now and need more help from the international community. But will countries around the world continue to fund this war and provide the ammunition? Is there any end in sight?
Right. And because there is no end in sight, there's obviously a fatigue here in terms of providing more resources, money, and weapons to Ukraine to fight this war. Best case scenario right now would be some sort of ceasefire, some sort of de-escalation, an off-ramp for Putin to take and to consider himself victorious, because we know that is what he wants. I actually wrote something over the weekend in terms of, Putin really seeing or measuring his success through how much land, territory, control, and power he has. And in that case, he will not back down until he sees himself as victorious in this situation. Now, Zelensky can petition all he wants, but again, it's going to be very difficult to hit up the international community for more money at this point. Billions and billions of dollars into this war. And of course, they've been able to have certain victories and to stop the Russians from advancing. The fact that it has taken 2 years in of itself is very surprising. And I think the Ukrainians have done a decent job, but that doesn't mean that they're going to win this war. It doesn't look like that would be an option here. So again, best case scenario is to end this as soon as we can, cut our losses, and to see how we can salvage the end of this war.
The U.S. government is considering sending troops to Haiti to quell violence as gangs vow to break the system. There are reports that in one attack, gangs were able to release more than 4,000 inmates, unleashing an army of hardened criminals into the streets of the Caribbean island nation, Lisa.
Yeah, being really run by gangs. This one incident that you report is enough to really take over the country in terms of this gang power. There is an effort by the international community to perhaps send troops, to send some sort of fortification, whether by the United Nations. The United States has also voiced that priority to get some order there. But for now, it's really dangerous. They have called out all assets to leave the country. And I know a lot of Haitians are very, very fearful. There have been abductions. There's been an increase, of course, in crime and murder, rape. And so that is why the international community is calling on all of us to work together to control the situation there.
Are we hearing if a lot of that crime is spilling over into the DR, Dominican Republic, which is, they share the same island, and the DR is where a lot of North Americans go to holiday?
Right, exactly right. There has been previously, in the last 6 months, we saw some warnings about travel there from the State Department here. But in terms of dealing with it, we're looking at this as an issue inside Haiti right now. And of course, it's going to trickle all over the place, including outside Haiti as well. But I think for right now, they want to see how they can control the situation. Very, very difficult.
The battle for global dominance is pitting the United States right now against China and Russia, and it may become out of this world, as in there are plans by the U.S.'s biggest rivals now to potentially build a nuclear power plant on the moon, Lisa. It seems a little far-fetched, but apparently this isn't a new idea.
It's not a new idea. It has actually won awards, this idea. Here in the United States, it was presented and thought of as a great idea. And guess who's listening? Our rivals, who now believe that, that place for world dominance is up for grabs. I think this story just gives me that headline, just gives me that takeaway where China, Russia, and the United States are truly vying, or at least they are. I don't know if the United States is in competition mode right now, especially outside of our country, but they are vying for that place. And if the United States has its eyes set on the moon, well, they will also. Again, we're seeing all sorts of competition, or in terms of at least playing catch up to not only catch up with the United States, but to surpass the United States. We're looking at cyber capabilities and military capabilities and naval capabilities, and now capabilities on the moon.
Incredible. Wow. Who would have thought that many years ago, right? She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The average Canadian spends more than they earn, and unfortunately, that's a trend that seems to be increasing and not decreasing. Well, is there a way to get out of debt? Is there a way perhaps to prevent from going into debt to begin with? Today's guest has some advice on this. Kent Prestige has years of experience as a CFO. He is the owner of Prestige Consulting and also an instructor at Reeves College here in Lethbridge, Alberta. Welcome to Bridge City News, Kent.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here, and it's an important topic that needs to be discussed. Maybe not one of the easy conversations to have. You probably create a lot of butterflies in people's lives, but I was recently reading that Canadian household debt to income ratio is about 184.5%. Can you explain what this means and describe how badly in debt are we?
Well, this is a real problem in Canada, and it's been getting worse for years and years and years. And what it means is that for every dollar of income that the average Canadian has, they have $1.84 worth of debt. So when you multiply that out, the average Canadian is in what we would consider pretty sad shape. For example, in the United States, this same number was 1 to 175, and that triggered the 2008 stock market crash that they experienced in the United States. And what happened down there is people were carrying more debt than they could afford, and defaults on mortgages led to the near collapse of the US economy, if you remember 2008.
Yeah. Now, would the Canadian government or the Canadian economy be able to sustain something like that?
Well, what I'm really concerned about as we look into the future here is that we would have a real serious problem. We have a different banking system than the United States has, and our banking requirements are a little bit more stringent than they were in the United States. But it doesn't get over the fact that we've had some serious increases in the last little while in inflation. That's driven the Bank of Canada to raise the interest rates. And people that were paying 2% on a variable rate mortgage are now going to be paying 4 or 5, maybe even more. And that is going to put a lot of stress on the market. And the problem is most of those people haven't renewed yet. So our problem is not over. A lot of people think, oh, we're going to lower the interest rate here right away, so the problem is over. But it's not, because a lot of people with 5-year term mortgages, they're going to come renewing in the next few years here, and they're going to have a substantial shock to their budgets.
Right. So are there any thoughts on why Canadians might have a mindset that causes us to spend far more beyond our means, or is it just the frog in the pot of boiling water scenario?
Well, it's a little bit of both. As I go back and I look at, I graduated from high school in the 1970s, and I go back and I look at that. We all wanted to have the same standard of living as our parents. Our parents had nice houses, nice cars, nice furniture. And so we wanted that. The problem was we weren't willing to wait the 20 years that our parents worked to achieve that. So a lot of us, especially in the early 70s, debt became very easy to acquire. That was kind of the point in time when credit cards became widely available, widely accepted, the early 70s. And, and now, of course, we also add to this easy debt that we've been allowed to accumulate. We add to that the inflation cycle that's happened again. But by the way, that inflation cycle is not new. In the 70s, we had the same thing happen. In fact, I would suggest even to a far deeper circumstance. I remember mortgages that were 18% interest. If you could you imagine 18% mortgage interest now at $400,000, $500,000 homes? It would just be a catastrophe.
It certainly would. I have another question then about debt. Of course, one of the things that we see is the shops that do payday loans. Is that kind of that next step as people are kind of going through that debt funnel, so to speak?
Oh, I have real bad feelings about payday loan. In fact, I would caution anybody that's watching today, if they are taking out loans from payday loans or those type of companies, I kind of call them legal loan sharks. The interest rates are outrageous. The fees are even more so outrageous. And it's just a recipe for disaster. Credit cards are bad. Payday loans are even worse when it comes to the type of debt that we structure. So I caution people to stay away from payday loans for sure.
Right. Now, as people find themselves in this debt vortex, is there a first step that you would recommend for people climbing out of debt?
Well, absolutely. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to find out what you're spending. In all honesty, a lot of people don't know what they're spending. I'm going to put it this way. They see the trees, the individual bills, but they don't see the forest, the total debt load that they're carrying compared to the income that they're carrying. So the first step is to find out what you're actually indebted to, what your totals come to, rather than just looking at individual bills.
That makes a lot of sense. I had recently heard that Canadians on average could be $21,000 in credit card debt. Have you heard that similar kind of number?
Actually, I'd tell you the number's probably worse. I know of people who have 1 or 2, 3 credit cards maxed out to $30,000 a piece. And when you start talking $30,000 on a credit card that's charging 24% interest, that's outrageous. In fact, one time I did a study for myself, and I did a spreadsheet to find out how long it would take to pay off a credit card if indeed you just paid the minimum payment every month. Now, the minimum payment in Canada is 3% of the balance. So say you had $5,000 on your credit card, 3% is your minimum payment, but 2% per month is the interest that's being added to it. So I believe and I can't remember exactly, but basically, if you got into debt in your 20s, you'd still be paying off that credit card in your 60s. Wow. And that's just because you're only making the minimum payment.
Right. So one really has to attack that principal amount.
Absolutely. That is definitely the key.
So my question then for you is, how does one pick from, let's say, 4 or 5 debt sources? Which one gets that attack against the principal first?
Well, there's a couple of different strategies that you can use to accomplish that. The first strategy, the one that it worked for me, it's the way I did it. I took the smallest bill that I had. Maybe it was $1,000. I can't remember. I've been out of debt for quite a while now, but I took the smallest debt that I had and I concentrated on paying it off. Every penny I had, I put on that debt. As soon as that debt was paid off, then I took the payment that I was using to pay it, I combined that with the payment for my next smallest debt, paid that off. When that was paid off, I took the payments from all 3 now and started paying on the next smallest debt. Now, a variant on that same one, and the reason I picked smallest is because, you know what, you can clean it up quickly. And you know what, when you're starting to dig out a debt, you're not going to be spending a lot of money. So it's pretty tough. So pick something that's going to give you hey, I got out of debt on that one. So I took the small one. Another strategy that can be very similar to that is to go after the bill that's got the highest interest rate on it and pay it off first. But typically that tends to be your credit card debt. And a lot of people, like I just said, there are people that have $30,000 on a credit card. And that is not a small debt to pay off. And it's going to take some serious hard work to do that.
Now, speaking of hard work, interest, of course, seems predatory and is such a challenge once we're down that road. Can you speak to how we need to maybe change the way we're living and viewing money that would actually help us to prioritize the payoff of debt?
Well, I mean, what happened to me is I started looking at my debt. I actually sat down, figured out what I owed, and I said, this isn't viable. I have to fix this. I have to change it. So you have to have a paradigm shift. You have to decide that I'm going to live below my means while I pay off the debt so that I can live above my means or equal to my means after the debt is gone. So it does take a paradigm shift or a mind changing. And it takes a word that everybody hates. It's called discipline. You have to discipline yourself to not go out and spend money.
Right. Well, and it's so easy to get attracted by the shiny objects, and it's easier to eat out, and it's easier to just go and do this instead of look for the thing. I know I have it somewhere. Can you talk maybe about some simple tasks that we could do around the house that would actually help us to live below our means?
Well, certainly if you can do repairs. Now, I have to admit, not everybody's handy. I grew up doing repairs and learning how to do woodwork and all those other things. So, for example, around my house, if the tap's leaking, I'm going to fix it. I'm not going to call in a plumber to fix that. If something's broken, I'm going to try and fix it. I'm not going to pay for a service that I can do myself. Well, in my case, I do all my own taxes, but again, that's part of my job too. But I mean, anything that you can do that can, save some money along the way. I used to have a little problem with my furnace. The sensor would get dirty on it, and then it wouldn't light, right? The fire wouldn't come on. So I paid the repairman once to come out, and he showed me how to fix it, and I fix it myself now. So anything that you can do to reduce your expenses is going to give you more money to turn around and pay down that debt. I mean, something as simple as not buying a coffee every morning on the way to work. A coffee by itself, about $2 a cup for a cup of coffee, $10 a week, $40 a month, right? That's $40 a month that you could be using to pay down some debt. So again, you can make little lifestyle changes that can make huge changes in your finances.
Right. And it's good to track those things too, because if we can measure something, we can control something.
That's the whole thing. Going back to my original statement there, that a lot of people don't even know what they're spending. They don't know what their debts are. And without knowing what their debts are, that puts them into a position where they spend because they just don't know. And that's a horrible situation. If you know, you're going to say, no, you know what? I can make coffee at home instead of buy it on the way to work, right?
Exactly. Now, we often hear about debt consolidation loans. It seems at first glance that this might be a wise plan to go to your bank and ask to amalgamate all of your debts. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I hate to disagree. It can be. If it's done right, it can relieve some of the interest burden that you might be carrying. But here's the problem with debt consolidation loans. You go to the bank, you might have 5 or 6 different payments that you're making. You borrow the money to pay off the debt on all 5 of those loans. Mm-hmm. But then what you do is you make your loan payment smaller so that you're not squeezed so much financially. And then the next thing you know, you're either spending that extra money, not saving it, or you are out getting more debt. I honestly, I don't recommend debt consolidation. It's good business for the banks, but unless you are extremely disciplined and unless you keep your payments at the same or even a higher rate, if you get a debt consolidation loan and you make the payments a little bit bigger so that you pay it off faster, that can be a benefit. But again, unless it comes down to that word that I use that nobody likes, it's called discipline. You have to discipline yourself to be able to handle your finances.
Absolutely. And that making those extra payments on whatever it is, whether it's a car loan or a consolidation loan or a credit card, makes an enormous, enormous difference.
Well, just think about it. I was just reading an article actually this morning that said that the average American on their credit card debt alone is accumulating $100 a month in interest. That's just interest. So, I mean, that's money that you're paying for nothing, really, just for the use of somebody else's money. That $100 would go a long way to paying down debt if you didn't have that interest card interest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any final advice on maybe how to change our mindset on personal debt and our spending habits?
Well, the final thoughts would certainly be, if you're a Christian, follow what the Word of God says. It says in Proverbs, it says that we're supposed to plan if we want to be well off. So do your planning. Don't just let things happen to you. Make things happen to your money. Instead of just kind of sitting back and accepting whatever happens, you make it happen by your determination and by your discipline.
That's right. And there is a chapter in Proverbs for every day of the month.
Absolutely. And not only that, you can manage your life by Proverbs.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Thanks so much for being with us today, Kent.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
It was our pleasure. That was Kent Prestige. He is the owner of Prestige Consulting and an instructor at Reeves College here in Lethbridge, Alberta. I'm Michael Clausen, and for all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.